And- Okay, thanks, Marci, for being here. Over to you.
Thanks so much for having me. Hello, everybody. I am very, very humbled and a little bit hesitant on this topic, just because I want to acknowledge from the get-go that really nobody is an expert in this topic yet, or we are all figuring it out and learning. I see lots of folks from Office of Information and Technology and data scientists. So I think on a lot of these points, many of you will be much more familiar with some of these concepts than I am. But I'll give you a little bit of background into why I started holding some of these conversations, especially with members of Congress and staff, and some of the lessons that we've gained over the past months. And it really has only been months to share about the ways in which people are thinking about these topics for the public sector. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen and acknowledge that, yes, I used Midjourney to create that image. Hannah was asking me what the prompt was. It was something like AI, public sector, innovation. Yes, so a brave new world that we are all entering together. As Hannah mentioned, my name is Marci Harris. I usually, when I do my intro for students, I teach at San Jose State and University of San Francisco. I always start with this picture, because I'm from a little town in Tennessee called Lexington, and for Google Maps, apparently the landmark that they have for us is the Walmart Supercenter, which is not entirely incorrect, but just to give you an idea of how small Lexington, Tennessee is. And I got my start in public service in a nearby town, Jackson, Tennessee, just after a tornado came through. So I say that just because I know many of you are probably working with local governments. My background, my government experience at the local level was in response as the response coordinator for a year and a half after this tornado to coordinate recovery efforts, which included a lot of community charrettes. We worked with the Urban Land Institute to create this advisory panel report and redevelopment plan, et cetera. So for those of you on the ground at the local level, I know these kinds of things are familiar. But that then led me to have my first experiences lobbying Congress. So that was going to pound the halls and request assistance. We were looking at the time for earmarks for kind of the special needs that we had for our recovery. And so it was my introduction to the very slow moving process at the federal level and the very acute needs of the people sitting in my office at the local level. And I continue to carry that appreciation for just the different ways in which the various wheels of government turn. I ended up going to work, as Hannah mentioned, with the Ways and Means Committee. This was during the process for negotiating the Affordable Care Act. And so this was a real introduction to the ways in which information flowed around Capitol Hill. And it was terrifying because it was the beginning of social media advocacy. We were getting bombarded with messages. It was very difficult to keep up, very difficult to share information. And so I ended up leaving the Hill in 2010 to start POPVOX.com, which was one of the early kind of 1.0 civic tech companies, with the idea that if we brought everything online and made it transparent and allowed people to write to their representatives on every bill as it was introduced, we would fix everything and beautiful little D-democracy would result. You may know already that we didn't fix everything, but it was a wonderful experience of learning, really how to lead a tech project. And that kind of brought us to be at the intersection of tech and Congress over the past decades. So my team at popvox.com and now with nonprofit POPVOX Foundation really work closely to provide technical assistance as Congress is thinking about its own use of technology. So we don't at all think about the regulation of technology in society. That's a very different thing, and plenty of people are working on that. This is really about the kinds of technology that member offices use, or that is utilized in the legislative process. So what you see here, this is a really interesting exercise during the pandemic. And actually Beth Novak, you can see her there, she participated, is just an example of the kinds of, tech connecting the dots that we do. Congress was really concerned about holding remote hearings in the early days of the pandemic. I know it sounds really strange now. So we recruited former members of Congress and held a quote unquote mock remote hearing, actually ended up holding 2 of them, to demonstrate that it wasn't that scary, and for these former members of Congress to show current members of Congress how it might work. And so, we actually had former members of Congress acting as chairs and co-chairs, and we had a witness. That Chion Wura there is from the UK Parliament talking about how they're operating remotely. There's a representative there from the Spanish Parliament. So that's just an example of the kind of technical assistance that we provide when Congress is thinking about new technologies for its own use. And over the past several years, that has been both working with primarily the House, which set up a select committee on modernization, but also, like I mentioned, just responding to the challenges, but also the opportunities that came along with COVID. And I'm sure you all saw this in your agencies and local governments as well. We saw, suggested tech upgrades that we had been discussing for over a decade that finally got done in a weekend during COVID. And one example of that is the eHop, or the ability for members to introduce bills digitally. We talked about that for years. It happened over a weekend. But one of the things that I would flag is the final report of the House Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress in the 117th Congress came out in December of 2022. And there is one mention of artificial intelligence. And this is it. This is the only thing that they say about artificial intelligence, and no mention of a large language model. So I think for all of us, we have had a similar experience of our awareness and kind of learning curve of AI and its potential importance to the public sphere really accelerating over the past 6 to 8 months. So we at POPVOX Foundation, this is the nonprofit, we provide a lot of tools and guides and things like that. So it was very natural as AI kind of jumped into the consciousness for us to join our friends, in this case at Lincoln Network and Demand Progress, to start holding education sessions for staff, to put out one of the early articles about what legislatures need to be thinking about. So this was back in February. And then the calls just started coming in because we had actually kind of put out the think piece. There were lots of people within both the House and Senate, but also executive branch agencies who wanted to talk about how these technologies could or should be leveraged in the public sector. So we have continued to host these conversations. I've continued to talk, especially with people internationally who are implementing in different ways in their countries. I was both spoken at an event in Germany this summer, bringing people together to talk about AI for parliaments, and in London. And there's just a great need to share best practices right now because everyone is learning. So with that, we're going to go back to really, really basic concepts that, again, we're all starting at different places on this. So for those of you in more technical roles for whom this is pretty basic, just bear with me. This is we'll get to the good stuff in a minute. But for those who are just getting started, just to revisit. So artificial intelligence is really just the concept of a computer system performing tasks that might require intelligence, visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, etc. The concept of artificial intelligence has developed and evolved over decades. So this is, one of those timelines of which there are many online, just kind of flagging some of the key moments in the history and development of artificial intelligence. I think for some of us, it may have begun to enter our consciousness with things like the Roomba making its way around our homes and bumping into walls and mapping our homes, and then on to speech recognition with iPhone and Siri and Amazon. I won't say her name because she'll wake up in the 2010s, to some development that was happening, I think, probably out of notice for many of us in the 2020s as OpenAI especially was working on its GPT-3 tool. People were starting to experiment with it. But really, most of us became aware of these new tools with the introduction of ChatGPT at the end of last year. Just to kind of look back at some of the uses of quote unquote AI, not generative AI, but other types of AI over the years, I'm going to flag some examples. And again, I've given you the background that is my experience is heavy on the Congress side of things. So a lot of these examples will be legislative specific, but I think they're instructive, and you can think about the ways in which these kinds of implementations work in your agencies or at your jurisdictional level. So predictive modeling is kind of the old school AI. In a lot of ways, predictive modeling was a bunch of spreadsheets. I remember having deep conversations with the Congressional Budget Office during the health reform days. The Congressional Budget Office, for anyone who doesn't know, they make the budgetary projections for any proposed legislation. And similarly, the Committee on Joint Taxation makes revenue projections for any changes to the tax code. And what they use is predictive modeling, and they have been doing that since they were set up in the 80s. And again, a lot of it was done with spreadsheets and really sophisticated formulas within there. And to this day, some of it is still done with spreadsheets, although their models are becoming more and more sophisticated as they make use of these newer tools. I think you've probably all heard the George Box quote, but it's worth repeating that all models are wrong, some are useful. Basically meaning that when you're using models to predict what's going to happen in the future, inevitably it will be wrong. It's very much like the National Weather Service trying to predict where a hurricane is going to make landfall. There are many different paths that it could take. Multiple models are run. You can start to see as those models are compared with each other where there is more agreement among the models. But we don't know until the hurricane comes through exactly where the path is going to go. And then you use that information to make future models better. But again, I don't think we've ever exactly predicted the path of a hurricane. So predictive models are really just a constant effort in trying to learn and improve the predictive qualities. And of course, we are all familiar with the slow the spread model. In the early days of COVID was saying to someone, isn't this exciting? Everybody in the world is looking at the same model, and we're all talking about like evidence-based policymaking. But that idea that there might be different potential outcomes based on based on decisions that are made along the way is a concept that we all became really familiar with there. And again, neither of these potential futures were exactly the way that things turned out, because it was based on 1 million human decisions that were made along the way. Next, there's machine learning, which again is an AI concept that's been around for a while. It focuses on algorithms and statistical models, basically allowing computers to perform functions without explicit instructions. And there's a few different kinds of ways that works. The way I like to think of it is, so for supervised machine learning, you basically are teaching the computer. So if you had a spreadsheet and you were kind of giving it to a computer to tell it to be a chatbot and answer all your incoming customer service inquiries like this, you would say, well, if you get this question, then you should say this. And if you get this question, then you should say this. So it's, almost, one-to-one, very direct training of the model. And then the next level is where you're giving the system a lot of unstructured data and just telling it to go learn something. So imagine that you were giving a computer, the equivalent of a stack of books and saying, here, read these books and learn something. And so the system is then seeking patterns in this data, but you haven't told it exactly what to learn. And then there's the reinforcement learning stage, where basically the system will have done that kind of unstructured learning. And then there's the additional feedback of, well, you learned this, but that's not quite right. So let's correct that, et cetera. So again, there's subdivisions of this kind of model training, but these are just kind of broad top level concepts. And an example of machine learning that I actually really love is one that was deployed by the Government Accountability's Innovation Lab this past year. It's really just a demonstration project, but I think a really effective one. They wanted to demonstrate the policy trade-offs of an identity verification system. So if you require someone to provide a government issued ID and, jump through a lot of hoops, et cetera, that begins to be a very high quality verification. But you could also impact access if you give so many requirements that you get to like 0% fraud. Well, you also might have a really low percentage of access to that program. Or if you are asking people who accessed it what their level of satisfaction was with the program, that could be really low. But similarly, if you don't have sufficient identity verification, then the fraud numbers pop up. But if you've worked very much with members of Congress, you know that they always want 0% fraud, 100% access, 100% satisfaction. And what I think this model does a really good job of demonstrating is how much those trade-offs kind of play with each other. So GAO used machine learning to look back at data about various experiences that people have with the sign up, et cetera, and to provide this simulation, kind of like SimCity. And more recently, it's just been reported in the past several weeks that the IRS is going to use machine learning to look for outlier enforcement cases. So I'll just play this video. It's like 1 minute.
The new IRS commissioner, his goal here was, first, let's use all this money to help the service part of our business, help people who, want help paying their taxes, understanding what they need to do. Now we're at phase 2, which is go after the wealthy tax cheats. And what they're doing is putting a lot of that money, number one, to enforcers. They're going to hire tens of thousands of auditors and enforcers. But number 2 is develop AI machine learning to figure out what patterns they can find in tax returns, especially for these large partnerships that can help them identify where people are hiding their income. And that's where an agency not known for its technological prowess is going to really make a step change. And I think this is a part where AI really can do some good, because AI is great at these massive data questions and huge computing power and applying that to finding the areas where humans didn't really see the patterns before, but AI can.
We just had a little chyron up there that said it was going to target 1,500 millionaires with tax, I think it was tax debt of 250.
That's right. So
$1 billion.
one of the parts of this is they're going after 1,600 people who have $1 million or more in income, who have recognized tax debt. In other words, we know known and acknowledged by the taxpayer that they owe at least $250,000.
$250,000, excuse me.
$250,000, and this could raise hundreds of millions of dollars if they return all that. You know, you and I would say, how can they get away with this already? The IRS just didn't have the staff to go after them legally and get this money back. So that's phase one. Phase two will be the AI learning. And phase three, they're going after the 75 largest partnerships. That's a lot of hedge funds and law firms. And look at how are they, because they're very complex returns. AI is going to help them sift through all that and narrow in on where they're underreporting income.
So again, I just want to emphasize there the point that, you know, this is pattern recognition, and what this new implementation will be is going where humans could not go. So like there would not be sufficient staff or capacity to actually go into the complex cases there that these new systems will allow the IRS to get to. Just want to stop for a minute. I know we've covered a lot of ground so far, and I checked the chat briefly. It looks like we're still on intros, but if there are questions or clarifying just thoughts that you have as we're going through, please feel free to jump in. Hannah's going to interrupt me just so we can address it as we go, because I know this stuff can get a little complex. The next type of AI.
Marci?
Yes.
Is it okay if I share your slides with folks after?
Yeah,
the session?
absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So I'll be sending around these slides.
So the next type of AI that again has existed for a while and has been used in government for a while is natural language processing, which is helping computers understand language, whether spoken or written, and vice versa. So translating human understandable language to ones and zeros and vice versa. So this is the technology that is used in chatbots and translation services and sentiment analysis and voice recognition. And right now, so this is just a quick demo of the comparative print suite that the House of Representatives developed that uses NLP to compare versions of bills so that a member could see how a proposed bill would change existing law. Unfortunately, if you vote on a bill before you have a time to get it into the comparative print suite, it still doesn't help. But if there's sufficient time to get the information in there, then this is a new tool that can really help with some situational awareness for the members before they vote, and you can imagine how it could be used in your work. Also back to GAO Innovation Lab, I'm a big fan. They've used natural language processing for a few different products that unfortunately are not available outside of the Innovation Lab. GAO is so protective of its reputation as being a source of fact and truth that it makes it a little difficult to release products that might have an error rate that's a little bit higher than GAO is comfortable with. But internally, they are using these tools that their innovation lab has developed that are really fantastic. So one of them, I really want access to this. They are now scraping all of the congressional committee websites to pull information about every pending hearing so that they can then go in through their Project Titan to search every historical GAO report to find if there are any GAO reports that are relevant to the topic that Congress is going to be discussing, so that then their team can send that report before the hearing, so Congress has the benefit of GAO's work on that topic. Again, the applications for this to lots of other people with lots of good information, or people who would like to access historical GAO reports, is tremendous. So I would love to see this more widely available. The other one, Project Woodworker, is pretty amazing. So this is, if you guys have used Grammarly to kind of help with your writing and provide corrections along the way, this is GAO's version of that. If you've ever read a GAO report, there's a specific GAO style that they stick to. It's very nonpartisan, a little bit dry, kind of authoritative, but it also avoids insulting anyone. They always say, progress made, but issues continue or something. But Project Woodworker is actually like an editor that provides suggestions to help authors within GAO stick to GAO style. So the demo I saw would identify any partisan language or any passive voice or et cetera. So again, this is the kind of thing that I think for your own agencies and jurisdictions, you could see this being immensely useful to kind of keep your public facing product within the bounds that the agency is comfortable with. And then speech recognition, which is a type of natural language processing, is being used in lots of places. You may be using it. Several cities have begun to use Wordly, which is a Zoom plugin that allows for instantaneous translation. We've tested it out. We're going to use it for a meeting that we're holding with a few international folks next month. But basically allows the participant to select which language they would like to get a transcript in, and also they can participate by entering a question in their own language that then is translated for the meeting administrators. It's really well done, very impressive, and again, several cities are starting to pick that up. Also in the Senate, you may have seen this news, Senator Fetterman has been using a transcription app as he recovers from a stroke to help him with processing, because audio processing is a challenge for him right now. Similarly, in parliaments around the world, European Parliament, they have to deal with, I think it's 14 languages they have to translate into. It may be more, but they have developed a really impressive platform for providing real-time transcripts and getting those into the languages of the various countries within the European Union. Speech to text, Parliament of Australia is using that, Brazilian Senate as well. I would say a lot more right now than the US Congress, which is still using clerks typing by hand for the official transcript in our Congress. And then computer vision, of course, I'm sure can think of lots of different ways that this is used. This example is the Brazilian Senate, which implemented a remote voting system during COVID, and they use they have members take a picture to identify themselves. Similarly, the European Parliament now processes video and identifies participants through a computer vision for hearing records. The Indian Parliament is managing security throughout their new building with facial recognition. So, also lots of questions about the implementation of something like that, which I think is probably why there's a little less of that in the US right now. But just to jump in, again, the previous examples are things that have existed for years and are probably in use in different degrees, perhaps even in your own agencies and jurisdictions. The new thing that we're all talking about is generative AI, is OpenAI, Anthropic's Claude, Google Bard, and the image generators like Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, and DALL-E. These are the new models that have come out over the past 6-8 months that have really made the AI tools available to the general public. So the foundation of these models is a large language model that is basically a text completion engine. So it has ingested just mountains and mountains and mountains of text, of books, of everything on Reddit, of, nobody knows exactly what's in the OpenAI model or the Anthropic Claude model. we think we probably know what's in the Google model. It's the whole internet. They've ingested this text and through machine learning and natural language processing, gotten very good at the ability to figure out what the next word should be in a generative way. So the generative piece basically means not just that the system is learning, not just that the system is discerning patterns, but it's also creating. OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google Bard are generating text. Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, and DALL-E are generating images. And now with some new features, these systems are also reading images. So it's kind of a brave new world on this. But yes, to think about the concept of completing the next word, the lovely a Disney example of we finish each other's sandwiches. But in general, these systems don't always get it right, but they are following what is a pattern that they've learned from the massive volumes of text that they've consumed over their training. And it's booming. So the uptake of these generative AI tools has blown out of the water any previous adoption cycles. We are, well past 100 million people using generative AI tools. 45% of the US population surveyed by Salesforce is using Gen AI. 65% are millennials or Gen Z. Like I said, I teach at college. I can assure you they are all using it. I actually have encouraged them to embrace it. I don't want to be like a math teacher who doesn't teach people how to use a calculator. So we talk a lot about how to use it responsibly. But it is just one of the tools that is now in the toolbox. I really think that this study illustrates the kinds of things that we in the public sector need to think about in terms of balancing productivity with other questions that come up around the use of these new tools. So this is just working with Boston Consulting Group. A team of social scientists over, I think, 3 months had a control group that did not use any of these new AI tools and a test group that used OpenAI ChatGPT. And they recorded a 25% increase in productivity by the consultants that were using these commercial, the OpenAI ChatGPT tool. And 40% higher quality result. So it's really significant, the productivity gain here for knowledge workers, these consultants who do, in many cases, very similar work to public servants, to legislative staffers, to people working in regulatory agencies or local governments. They're writing reports, they're analyzing data, they're reading massive quantities of information and summarizing. So very similar work, a 25% gain in productivity. And notably, the biggest gain was essentially for the mid-level performers. So the worst consultants had the biggest jump in their performance, 43%. The top consultants who were already operating at a high level still got a boost, but not as significantly. So one of the participants one of the social scientists called these tools a skill leveler. So it's a really interesting kind of concept to keep in mind, I think, of the potential for these tools to increase productivity, effectiveness, and even quality of work in a knowledge sphere. Is there a question? I just see something in chat.
It's
state
Maria.
policies. Yeah, I'll get to
I'll
that.
read it out in case anyone isn't looking at the chat or doesn't have access to it. Maria's asking what states, if any, have developed the best policies that you've seen regarding the use of generative AI in education. And feel free, Marci, to take this now or whenever you prefer.
Yeah, that's helpful. I have not looked specifically into the policies regarding education, and I'll just say, from my experience working in the Cal State system, the University of San Francisco, they currently are letting professors kind of make their own policies. And I think, professors have really different approaches to it. There are a couple of universities that have come out with their own policies, but I don't think there have been any statewide mandates. I'm not quite sure how that would go. But for my own, and I'm happy to share an article where I was talking about what my instructions are to students. I encourage them to use it at both the outlining stage and also kind of as a partner, going back and forth on ideation and brainstorming, developing out concepts, and certainly in helping to rephrase things. But my background is law. I am obsessive about footnotes. So every fact has to be cited. So even if they've worked with an LLM tool to develop a concept, everything they didn't wake up independently knowing has to be cited in a footnote that I can go to and find their source. So, that's my personal policy. We'll see how it develops for others. I pulled this quote from an Italian parliamentary official that I've been kind of tweeting with lately. There's this group of nerds around the world who are thinking about how LLMs are going to be used in legislative operations. And he made such a good point here that it was kind of an aha moment for me, which is basically that so much of government and law is words. It is words. Those are the bricks of governing in so many ways. And so it really is natural that as these tools are developed, that law and government are one of the areas in which they can be most effective. So I really think that that's helpful context for thinking about, questions of would we, should we, could we on adoption. So thinking about immediate use cases, and this is just what we're starting to see, among congressional staff. They are using it to summarize large texts and explain complex policies. For anybody whose challenge it is to take, a stack of paper and turn it into plain language, this is a godsend. But of course, doing that still requires human review. You can't just decide that you're going to take ChatGPT's or Claude's description of what a policy does. Like, the lawyer still needs to look at that and make sure that that is in fact what it actually does, or that requirement is still explained well. There's a lot of recording, transcribing meetings, generating summaries. I can imagine that probably that will happen with the Otter AI transcript that is happening now for this meeting. Frequent requests and, constituent correspondence that's coming in. A lot of offices are starting to use it to help generate those letters. Language translation, drafting, press releases, speeches, social media posts. They're great with, tweets and Facebook posts and happy holidays and things like that. Onboarding and training, cleaning up data. This is one of my favorite uses for it, is taking a dump of terribly formatted data and telling it to clean it up and put it in a table that I can then just copy and paste into a Google Sheet. It's like the clouds part for me. Analyzing sentiment in public communications, you can drop it in and ask for a sentiment analysis. and also brainstorming new policy ideas. All very helpful on that front. Here's some examples from my friend Daniel Schuman at Demand Progress. This is part of a presentation that we hosted for congressional staff. He demonstrates how agile these tools are in coming up with bill acronyms. So for anyone who's worked in Congress, this is like ridiculous amounts of staff time going to trying to come up with a catchy bill acronym. You can have 10 or 20 to choose from using ChatGPT or Claude or Bard for your bill ideas. Here's write 5 tweets on, one version or the other version of the debt ceiling, thing. Instantly, you've got 5 tweets. Summarize this article into bullet points. This is, these tools are very useful for that. And on each of these, I would just say, what is important to note is this is not sensitive information, right? This kind of dropping this kind of information into a chatbot is not in any way using constituent information or secure information, et cetera, which is one of the things we'll talk about in just a minute that's so important. This is from my colleague Ann Meeker. She was demonstrating how you might summarize a case and get bullet points of a very complex description of a case, and then use it to draft a letter to an agency. Again, she pulled out all of the identifying information and just had the case information there. But it's, very helpful in trying to distill the essence of complex, especially legal documents. So yes, lawmakers are starting to experiment with AI to help them come up with policy proposals. And California has apparently just become the Senate to pass a resolution that was officially drafted by AI. But I want to flag the legislative drafting issue as kind of an example of the limbo state that we are in right now with these technologies. So you have a lot of staffers and members of Congress who are quote unquote drafting bills with these tools and sending them on to the very professional lawyers in the House Office of Legislative Counsel, whose job it is to make sure that the policy intent is accurately reflected in the bill text. And they're getting a lot of, hey, could you take a quick look at this? I just drafted it, should be good to go, thanks. And the lawyers who still have to do the work of evaluating the policy intent and what the legislative language should do are being bombarded. The volume that they're receiving is increasing substantially. They are not currently using these tools because these tools are not there yet to help them with the drafting. So you have an increase in volume, an increase in expectation, and no corresponding increase in resources for the professionals who are having to deal with this. So it really is right now a little bit of the worst case scenario for the professionals in an office like Legislative Counsel. And I'm sure this is the case, in a regulatory agency or state offices that are similar. So just flagging that, it is really important to understand that some of the increases in quote unquote productivity are actually increasing volume that decrease someone else's productivity. So there's a lot of balloon squeezing going on, I think, in institutions right now, where the amount of correspondence coming in or requests or grant applications, et cetera, is increasing and not an increase in resources or tools to deal with that. So this is some of my own experimentation. This is an article that I wrote a few weeks ago when I used Claude to summarize the hearing. And I mean, this was a hearing I was really interested in what happened there. I was busy and not able to sit there for an hour and a half and watch it. So, I went over to YouTube and pulled up the video. I copied the transcript that YouTube had made because the official transcript's not available yet. So I used the YouTube transcript. I dropped it into Claude, which allows for a really big bulk of text, and just said, please generate a summary and key points. I interacted with it a little bit and then had it write up a memo. And, the memo wasn't perfect. And if I had played around a little bit with the style, it would be more in my voice. But it was great for under 5 minutes trying to get the gist of what had happened in that hearing that I couldn't attend. And when you think about the kinds of information that's being generated through meetings and hearings and briefings and, so many things within the US legislative branch or this regulatory agency or this municipal body, there's so much information that is not currently absorbed by anyone because none of us have the capacity to go through it all. So the opportunity for these tools to make it even more possible to actually start to process information is really significant. Aren't there questions up there, Hannah, before I?
Yes, we have two questions and we also have a comment. So first I'll actually just read a comment from Jennifer who says publishers are apparently having a similar problem where they are getting overwhelmed with people submitting generative AI work, which they can create really quickly and then the publisher can't accept them but has to figure out which are generated versus original work. So interesting to hear across sectors, this is an issue. We have a question from Michael who's asking, in developing content for classes or presentations, do you have guidance on how to deal with rights and permissions issues? I've discovered on some prompt requests that I might get great results, but images that are returned actually have copyright or use restrictions.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think there are a few image generators that are starting to deal with that. That's going to be their comparative advantage. I cannot remember the name of the company off the top of my head. It's one of those stock image, it may be stock photo, but a stock image company that is now guaranteeing that if you use their generator, all of your images will be protected. I think that will end up being a differentiator for some of these models, especially when it comes to guidance from public sector of what they can and can't use. Those that are more careful with rights and permissions may be authorized when others are not. I think we're still a little bit in the Wild West, but I could definitely see that becoming part of a policy. Getty, thank you. Hey, Amanda, good to see you.
We also have one more question from Anna, who's asking, the study you mentioned showed how AI improved performance. Any findings on specific skills deteriorating because of the high use of AI in consultancy work?
It's a wonderful question, Anna, and I don't think we're there yet. So I think inevitably, I am not the social scientist to make the prediction, but I know that I can't back up or parallel park as well since I got the camera that helps me do it with a little beep. And I do think that we as humans are, we are outsourcing part of our brain to the system, ditto my sense of direction that no longer exists unless I'm following Google Maps. So I think there really are going to be questions about the kinds of skills that we continue to prioritize and preserve and train for and if maybe test for. But also there will be, when I talk about this example of legislative counsel, what I am really interested in is how we are using the expertise of the lawyers today who have 40 years of institutional knowledge in their brains and understand how to really, the real trade-offs and ins and outs of the way that you approach policy. I am really interested in how we, over the next 2, 3, 4 years, make sure that that knowledge is captured so that in 10 years from now, when lawyers come on board and they have only been trained using machines for some of these things, they have the benefit of that institutional knowledge of the lawyers that are there today. I think the same is true for analysts in certain research agencies like CRS, CBO, other state and local agencies, et cetera, really figuring out how to preserve and hold on to that knowledge today.
Thanks, Marci. We have another question. Should I put it to you closer to the Q&A, or you want to take it now?
Yeah, I have some recommendations later, so that we may hit it, and then if not, we can cover it in Q&A.
Great.
Here's one more use case, just to give you an example of how I'm using this stuff. So you may have seen that there was actually an executive order during the Trump administration requiring agencies to report their uses of AI. And so the agencies have reported. Yes, the reporting really is a website like this that requires you to click every agency's link and then go to the agency's page and then find a different version of their reporting that has different fields for every agency. And it is nightmarish. And for someone who's been watching like the open data movement for the past 15 years, it just feels like contempt. I don't think they meant it that way, but it's really bad. And so as I was looking through and trying to draw any conclusions out of what agencies were reporting, I mean, there is just no way to compare this or to even start to draw any conclusions whatsoever. So I clicked through to every agency's website and found Commerce, I swear to God, PDF, but found their information and copied it and dropped it into Anthropic Claude with the same prompt for each of them. Take this information, turn it into a table with these fields. And so for each of them, Anthropic Claude returned table information that I then pasted into a Google spreadsheet so that I had standardized information about all of these agencies reporting of their AI use cases. I tweeted about it and got lots of folks who came in to check out the spreadsheet and to also talk about how it could be done better in the future. I think that the agencies will have stronger reporting, standard requirements in the future. But what was amazing is once this was all in the spreadsheet, I could then ask Anthropic Claude to identify themes and to pull out, key examples and things like that. So I was able to start to interact with this data once it was in there, which was really phenomenal. And there are some plugins now for ChatGPT or for GPT-4 that make this even easier. You can interact with a PDF. It's wonderful. So just thinking about the different levels of implementation and adoption in government, I just want to highlight that I think there are a few stages. So there's like old school machine learning, natural language processing integrated into government IT, CBO, modeling, GAO, et cetera. Then there's the commercial off-the-shelf software that leverages AI. So there are a lot of software solutions that you are probably already using that are starting to incorporate AI and generative AI into those applications. So Airtable or Zapier or Zoom, they all have options to use AI solutions. You may already have those software applications approved for use within your agency. That may be one entry point for some of these tools coming in to the public sector. And then, of course, experimentation with these third-party Gen AI tools, ChatGPT, Google Bard, Anthropic Claude, et cetera. That's kind of what we're seeing now. I think the next stage, which is just what we're starting to see, is developing custom apps or improving custom software, leveraging commercial tools. So for example, let's see if I can, I'll show you. So this is something that we're experimenting with. I'm gonna have to stop share and share again. So this is over on the popvox.com side. So what you'll see here is just a very quick demonstration of a tool for casework. So the concept here is, could you take unstructured information, so a transcript from a call or an email from a constituent or notes from a meeting, and drop it in and have it automatically populate the case? And so you'll see here, there's the transcript from a call, and then it starts to process it. And then it identifies, oh, here's a quick summary of the case. Here's a category. Here are keywords. Here's the date it was started. I'm pulling out the primary contact, et cetera. So that system there is actually using OpenAI's API to help with the data extraction. So that is the kind of leveraging the commercial models for bespoke applications that we may see in the near term. Let's see if I can find my way back to the presentation. And then the last piece is, eventually we will likely see government entities with their own in-house LLMs. I do think that we will see Congress develop its own LLM that is trained on official information. I have a friend who's working on what he calls a large legal language model. So it's just trained on code, regulatory information, judicial decisions, et cetera. So these models may be used to interact again with commercial models in some way, but having more kind of fit for purpose public sector implementations, I think, is going to be pretty prevalent in the coming years. I know we're right at the hour. I'm going to zoom through the rest of this, and then we can jump to Q&A. So this is kind of a summary. I used ChatGPT to summarize a chart from Amazon Web Services that was identifying the different potential implementation in the public sector for different kinds of uses. So you have different risks and different mitigation tactics that you should take to address those risks if you're just doing analysis. Well, it's very different if you are generating something for the public to see. That is much higher risk. And so you need to take different steps in the public sector if that's how you're using these technologies, et cetera. So just that idea of balancing the risk and how you address it will be important. I think that's a bit further out than like an intro conversation, which I know is the goal of this discussion today, but just kind of flagging that that's on the horizon. These were our recommendations to Congress back in April, and I'm actually really happy to say that this has kind of been followed, at least in the House. So starting a working group, for example, where staffers experimenting with these technologies can share information, that happened. Clarifying guidance for incorporating tools, that happened. Learning from other industries and legislatures, that happened, that's happening. Monitoring changes in advocacy practices and constituent engagement, looking for inauthentic campaigns and increases in volume, they're doing that. And those things are happening. And then over the short term, beginning to have hearings, commissioning experts to provide reports and to discuss how they're using it, encouraging prototypes. We're seeing all of this. And then there's the kind of medium and longer term, which is probably going to require some appropriation, some authority, some permission, some direction from members on how they'd like to see the institution move forward. And I think ultimately over the long term, fundamentally, the way we make laws, implement laws, oversee, will change significantly because of these tools. Let's see. There was one thing that So we've kind of framed this as a continuum. Like what you're seeing today are these low-level, low-risk administrative tasks. But there really is kind of this raising, through the levels of what's going to take more specialization, what's going to take more customization, what's going to require more balancing of risk and other larger questions. So, there's a lot to go there. And then, yes, just to flag, and I think there were some questions about examples. AI is making everybody nervous. You have some states and localities like Maine that basically banned the executive branch from using it because of cybersecurity concerns. You have Vermont that's using it to generate code for internal systems. Various cities have begun to come out with their policies. Like the city of Boston was one of the first out. Seattle and San Jose have also come out with AI guidelines. And I think, there are some recommendations here, which I'll just kind of leave for future discussion. I know you'll get the slides, but one thing that I really would flag is to encourage experimentation. It is just impossible to understand what is possible unless you're playing with it. So among your team, I think being very clear about what the risks are and that you should never put constituent data into a system, and you should never put secret or secure or sensitive information into a system. But beyond that, playing around with it to understand what is possible, to help clean up data, to help process reports, to summarize, et cetera. It's both helpful on the efficiency side, but it is helpful for you as you begin to process what is going to be possible and think about policies that you need to establish in the future. GovTech had 50 prompts for local government that I thought were pretty fabulous. So I include the link in there, but it's like draft a speech, develop a risk analysis, identify potential stakeholders, summarize the finding of this report, those kinds of things. And these are just a few kind of framing slides from Sam Hammond of Foundation for American Innovation, who presented to a group of congressional staffers recently. And he's really flagging how much these tools are ultimately going to disrupt government operations. The idea of bureaucracies as fleshy APIs was kind of funny, but really that there are going to need to be underlying process changes to allow government to operate with these new capabilities. And he was flagging how disruptive various technologies have been throughout history, including the printing press, driving the Reformation and the creation of modern nation states, or the 90s IT boom that drove e-government, or the internet leading to the Arab Spring and China's surveillance state. This will be disruptive. There is no chance that this does not impact your work. So becoming familiar now and just starting to work with each other to share best practices and experiences is going to be important. And I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Marci. That was fantastic. Just a few things. I'm glad you mentioned the various approaches that city and state governments are taking on generative AI. I will use that to plug that on November 2nd, one of our workshops in this series is with Boston's Chief Information Officer, Santiago Garces, and he's the one who developed Boston's guidelines on using generative AI for city employees. So that's on November 2nd, but we have a whole host of workshops coming up through December on AI. So I'll put the link back in the chat to register for those. And I mean, it's everything on writing a generative AI use policy, to hands-on tutorials for text tools and image tools, and familiarizing yourself with how to use it, bringing tech and AI government talent into government, AI ethics. So there's a whole range, and you can sign up on the form that I put into the chat. I'm also going to put a link to our feedback form. We love hearing from you. We love knowing what you thought of each of our sessions. So please, it just takes 1 minute to fill this out. So if you could do this after the session, that would be great. We've got a number of really great questions. I'm going to just come off of recording now.